Okay, let us begin our session. Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishlesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshutarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vacharam Pangurlangayate Grim Yatkipatam Ham Vande Shri Guru Bhaktinataranam मम पवित्रो पवित्रो वासवावस्थांगतोपि वयस्मरेत पुंडरीकाक्षसाभ्यन्तरं सचै श्री विष्णु श्री विष्णु श्री विष्णु. Great. Hare Krishna. So welcome all for the art of relationships. So in this seminar we're going to focus on 8 to 9 topics. I mean, like, there are different topics. So here in terms of relationship, we're not just going to look at the human relationships, but along with human relationships, we are gonna touch or we're gonna dwell into certain topics which is very much related to the inner growth. And apart from that, we're gonna focus or talk a little bit about our foundational roots, our relationship with the people, the investment in the people, and a couple of things that you will come up. So right on the first screen, you can see the different topics that we're going to cover for today. So the first one comes relationships and psychology. Second comes principles and applications. Third comes Sambandha versus Bandhan. Again, next comes the Swadharma versus Loka Sangraha. The next comes relationship, loyalty and stability. Then comes space and relationship. Then comes cultural dependence and responsible independence. And the last one comes break in relationship. Great. So let us begin with our first topic. That is, your psychology is represented by your words. So whatever you have, whatever thought process that you carry, the same thing comes as an action or as a word from you. Like, let's say, for example, if you're very violent in your words or too violent in your action, it is by default that your thoughts also become very violent. Like, for example, nowadays people use very violent words in English, like hit the road. Although it looks very simple, but it does have an effect on your psychology. So your thought process reflects your actions and words, and vice versa. So both of them are like, interaction with each other. So let's understand the first thing, that is our foundational roots. So a relationship is nothing but a relation, the connection to its roots. So here we have three things. One is that what I spoke about, Bharat and Bharatiyata, and the role of geography and history. So they say geography helps us to understand the external borders, which which helps us to make a connection to where we belong to. Like, let's say if you are in a Bharat, you know where your country is, like, from north to Himalayas, south to, like, Indian Ocean, east, we have like Thar Desert, or the other side we have East India, like, the borders and everything. So understanding one's geography helps us to connect to where we are, like, saying that, okay, this is my country, this is my city, and this is where I belong to. Like, if you actually understand, it is also psychologically proven, and it has been discussion from a long time, that when a person, he lives at the place where he is born, he tends to be more confident. Like, one of the very one of the very hot debate nowadays that you find is the new generation or the second generation of American kids, Indian American kids. So they are facing something called as identity crisis, because they are not Indians. Because they are not Indian born, they have never been to India. It's just that their parents were from Indian. So the first generation, now they are the second generation. So they don't belong to India. At the same time, they're not American. So that's why they doesn't belong to America as well. So it creates a lot of conflict in the minds of the second generation that they belong neither to India nor to US. It's like their whole identity is in the crisis. So that's why if you actually see in the very childhood, even if you see the SSA books or any school subjects, one of the first things that they teach children is the geography. And it is a part of psychology as well. And the next one comes your history. So your history is nothing but the philosophy, like whatever history that we had, be it Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj or Maharana Pratap, or if you see Chakravarti Ashok Samrat, or we have like so many things. Our culture, our history is like philosophy, right? So it's like Bharat is uh, more like what do you say? Yeah. So Bharat is a geography, and Bharatiyata is that history, and together it makes a good bond to our roots that is very much rooted in this country, right? And hence, understanding one's root becomes very, very important to build up his own psychology, to build up that confidence of that existence, so that you don't end up having a crisis in your like crisis in terms of your identity. Okay, the next slide is very much connected to the last point: connection to the roots, naming one's identity. So, yeah, just one second. Okay, yeah. Great. So, yeah, relationship is connection to the roots, and application is based on circumstantial surroundings. Okay, so it says, so what does it mean that in the previous slides I showed you the connection to the roots? Example, naming one's identity. Like nowadays, if you see the trend, nowadays as it has been happening from last a decade in India, especially. I mean, Western it was always there, but in India it is becoming more and more prevalent. Like people don't identify themselves with their own full name as well. Like for example, if you go to any traditional Indian temple, you take your full name, you take your father's name, you take your gotra name as well. So basically you are reminding yourself to the roots, to the place where you belong to the kula that you belong to the dharma that you belong to. So it's like making your identity more and more and more stronger. But nowadays, what is happening? Many kids, they go to school. If their name is wrong, they don't even pronounce their name full. They have like, if someone has a name called Kalyan, they will call as Cal. Like if someone has a Raman, so they will just call it as a Ram, right? So the slowly the trend of reminding oneself to the roots of their origin, of their connection to the previous dharmas, your kula, your jati, it's slowly fading away. What happens? So this looks very simple, as in, okay, it's how does that matter? It's just the name, right? But if you actually see many youngsters, they don't know their own gotra. I mean, I have seen many of my friends, they don't even know their gotra. They don't feel very much connected to any place. That's why they keep wanting, they want more and more interest, and that's why they keep switching the cities. Some 1 or 2 years they will be in Hyderabad, another 2 years they would want to be in Bangalore, then Pune, then Mumbai, then US, then Europe. So they always want to move out because they feel, I'm lacking interest. Okay, I'm done more, I need to go more. So basically they are just away from the roots, which creates a high level of instability in terms of their connection, in terms of their existence. And they struggle a lot to to set their base strong at one point. And all these start from the small things like these. Like if you go any traditional temples, you take out your name again, as I mentioned, you take your whole history out there. You, every time you tell that, you remember your own connection, that you belong to Bharat. And with that, I mean, this is something like really interesting. Like how the basic things in our life, the very small things that we do or that we have been doing from very childhood, builds up so much of psychology. So Bharat, understanding our geography, history, understanding our Bharatiyata, history, that is like, uh, more like, what do you call, our philosophy. And if you combine this geography and history, that's when you develop Atmiyata. I mean, this is like non-translatable. There is no word in English which can equally translate Atmiyata. So Atmiyata, so you develop Atmiyata towards your motherland, towards the people of your country. When you develop an Atmiyata, automatically you develop the sensitivity, the compassion, and all the other things. So that's why the very first focus of today's session is to make your roots more and more strong. So that's why I kept it as, relationships and psychology, the heading. Why? Because the very connection, the very relationships that we have in terms of our family, in terms of to the country, sets our psychology. Next comes principles unchangeable, applications changeable. Okay, this is something that has been very, very controversial, that many people in many parts of India, they really abuse Manu, like, Manu Samhita. Manu Samhita is nothing but the rule book of Hindus, or by and large it's a rule book of whole world. So it doesn't speak about which god you should worship. Manu Samhita is a pure rule book. So what happens at times, Manu laid down certain points. Like for example, Manu says one of the point that you should never marry into a family. Like being a boy, you should never, like he doesn't say never, but you should not marry into a family where there is no male heir to those family. Now, people did not understand in what context, in what way Manu actually wrote down those statements. They clearly made out the statement that, look how patriarchal the Manu is. He said any family who does not have son, you should not get married into that family. Like, it is too much partial. He's a sexist. That's a gender discrimination, so many things. But if you carefully understand what Manu is trying to tell in that Manu Samhita is that it is not that he's telling don't marry. It's just that he's making you more alert. See, boy, if you want to marry in that family where there is no male heir, it is your duty to complete everything there. Because according to the Shastra, if you leave your body with no male heir, the responsibility of the Antim Samskar, the Pendadan, and the every year Shraddha goes to the son-in-law. If you don't have son-in-law, then your daughter's son is responsible for that. Right? So Manu's statement is just an alertness that if you want to marry in such and such family, then you have got to be alert to take the responsibility of such family. So, and that's why they say scriptures, the guidelines in the scriptures, the instruction in the scriptures are very, very contextual and very, very sensitive. If you don't understand the context of that statement, you might make out a very you can even say dangerous, or you can even take out altogether a different meaning, and you misunderstand the whole scriptures. Also, the most important point that Manu leads in the Shastra clearly is that principles are unchangeable, applications are changeable. So many times what people say in, not so good educated, as in I'm not talking about literacy, being able to study Hindi, English, whatever it is, that is called literacy. Having that wisdom is what I call as educated. So many people who are not properly educated, they just say, okay, nahi, hamare shastra mein aisa kaha gaya hai, hum aisa hi karenge hum. Hamare purvajon ne humko aisa sikhaya hai, to hum aisa hi karenge hum. So this is something that, especially the modern youth of India is definitely don't want to accept it. For that matter, it is not relevant as well. So there are many principles in the scriptures. If you want to apply it as it is, you're totally outdated, you're totally not relevant, because that is not possible at all. Okay, I'll give you a simple example. Waking up early in the morning, 4 a.m. or 4 to 6 a.m. is a principle. You can never say no, since because I do a night shift or many of the corporates are doing night shift, so that principle is wrong. No. Principles are unchangeable and principles are not wrong at all. But to put a Hitlergiri type of rule that you have to wake up at 6 a.m., that is wrong. Like for example, if a person comes after a night duty like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning, and if you really force him in the name of principles to wake up at the 6 a.m., he won't be able to survive because of the lack of sleep. So that's why principles cannot be applied as it is. You can give a little bit of concession. Okay, since you're sleeping at 2, you calculate your 6 to 7 hours, you wake up at 7 or 8 o'clock. It's something like this. So here what are we doing? We are giving a little bit of liberty for the application of the principle. But at the same time, saying that no, waking up in the morning 4 to 6 a.m. is definitely a wrong subject, that is also wrong. So one should be very, very careful to what extent are we supposed to apply the principles in one's life. That is very careful. Why? Because relationship is like in itself, try to work a relationship itself is like a battlefield, and you can't win a battle, or you can't do a battle, with improper philosophy, with improper understanding of the scriptures and all these contexts. So that's why, and also different scriptures, if you see in Sanatan Dharma, different scriptures have a different way of telling, or uh, instructing a different things. Like Ayurveda speaks about the body health. Ayurveda does not speak about mukti, because mukti is another subject. The liberation, the back to God, that concept is some other scriptures like Bhagavatam, or Bhagavad Gita doesn't speak about what to eat, what to sleep, but like how much to do it. That is the principle of Ayurveda. So Sanatan Dharma, different sections of the scriptures have a different purpose and different goals, right? And depending upon that book, what depending upon those principles, how you can actually put it in practice in the current world, implementation is totally based upon time, place, circumstances. So I'll repeat it quickly. Let's say you want to learn about this body, you go to the particular section of Vedic scriptures, that is your Ayurveda. You go to Ayurveda, you learn the principles, you implement it along with the time, place, and circumstances. And if you want to learn about the life, you go to Bhagavad Gita, learn the principles of life, or learn the principle from Chanakya Pandit and Arthashastra and so many other stuffs. You learn the principles, again, application, time, place, circumstances. Again, you read Bhagavatam to understand about the love of Godhead, to understand about liberation from this whole material creation. Again, time, place, circumstances is application. So that's why principles and application are two different things. And Manu Samhita clearly says that you are allowed to take a leverage in applying these. Now the next comes, Manu says in the chapter 3, text number 62, that a charming partner lends charm to everything and makes whole world look at with a charm. Just a second. Yeah, look attractive, but to partner. But charmless partner robs the world of his own charm. So they say home is a foundation of a person's character. So it's like whatever you are in the home is what you will project outside. A quick example. Let's say if you're a thief in the home, your psychology is more of a thief. Ultimately, in some or the other way, you will turn out to be a thief only even in the outside world. Or you can see there are many kids. This is something I'm sure we all must have seen, at least, if not experienced, that kids who had a very troubled childhood, especially in terms of relationship with their parents and all, they tend to have problems even in their own relationships as well. I mean, personally, I know a person who has grown up seeing fights between the parents. And it created such an impression in his mind that he did not want to get into a relationship, because he was like, okay, down the line, even I'm going to turn like my parents in future. So what's the purpose of me going into a relationship? So they say whatever is there in your home, that's why raising kids is one of the most, it would be an understatement to tell that it's a very difficult task, because you're not raising a kid just biologically, like khana khilaya, khali padaya, job karwaya. No, it's not that. You're shaping your next generation, because what you make your son, he will make his son, like that. So in one sense, you are a builder of whole dynasty or whole clan. So you have to be like very, very careful to what you're feeding the mind of your kids, what kind of environment you're providing them. Forget about the kids, even your grandkids. So they say kids, or the whatever, the small kids, they look at you and they see, and they learn more than the words. Your actions is what inspire people. So that's why having a good relationship is in the house is very, very important. Therefore, Sanskrit uses the word sambandha, samyak bandhan. So sambandh is something that which liberates. So sambandh, what is a bandhan? Bandhan is between the two people, right? A relationship. And the samyak bandhan. So relationship is a bondage which liberates. I mean, I would say relation is a bondage which is supposed to liberate. But if in case a relationship is, creates a lot of bondage, that's called bandhan. So that's why one should always aim to find out find out that sambandh in a relationships, right? So, and which is very to understand this more, I'm going to move more and more. So you can see another two tabs here, that is said the definition of happiness and definition of misery. So in the chapter 4 of verse 159 and verse 60, they gave a definition of happiness and misery. So what is happiness? Liberty in all respect is happiness. And what is misery? Dependence in all is is a misery. For example, I'll give you the first example, liberty. So what happens at times, we try to control the other partner way too much. We want always, whatever I say, it has to happen in that way. You don't communicate well. You don't give another person an equal chance to participate. See, relationship is something where, relationship means more than one person. When there are more person, there is equal participation is must. Equal participation is required. But where only one person speaks, another person listens, neither that's a relationship nor it's a communication. Long ago I quoted, this is one line that I heard somewhere in a good place. So they say, संबंध में संवाद आवश्यक है. अगर सिर्फ एक व्यक्ति बोले और दूसरा सुनता रहे, ना तो संबंध है ना तो संवाद है. So the translation goes this way. In a relationships, communication is important. If only one person is keep on going and another person is just keep on receiving, neither that's a communication nor it's a relationship. It's just a burden. Also, losing one's own identity. This happens like very, very regular. It happens at large. Like when we're in a relationship, right? In order to please the other person, we just slowly tends to forget our own identity. See, I'm not telling that you're not supposed to please your husband, wife, spouse, kids, or everything. No, it goes that way. But you also have to make sure that you're not losing your own self. You are having your own identity. This is something that many women in India, at least, as in very big joint family or many places, it says that in taking care of their husband, kids, sassur, family, growth, this, that, and all, their whole identity just remains to that house. Again, I'm not telling like leave your husband, kids, and everything, just go for your own job or something like that. No, there has to be a balance in everything. But you also have to make sure that you have your own identity, which can actually get you that liberty. Because unless and until there is no liberty, there is no happiness. And if you're depending on the other person, or if that other person is making you dependent on you, that is totally too much of misery. I'll give you a classic example. Like mothers generally, so they raise kids, and this is like very, very prevalent in every part of India. Not sure about the foreign, but in India it happens. So what happens after marriage? A mother is supposed to step back, because now she has to accept that the son has a major role of a wife in his life. But still what she tries to does, no, he's my son. I have raised him in my womb for 9 months and so many things. Those sentiments are good. Those sentiments are real and very much valid. But you should not go to such an extent that you really want to make them dependent on you. Like a teacher cannot say, oh, you're a good student, you're my favorite student, I don't want to leave you, I'll keep failing you. What happens? He will be in misery and that person will also be in misery for the rest of the life. Right? So that dependency, either you make someone else depend on you, not letting them go, or you depending upon the other person totally. Ultimately, it's going to be a burden on the other partner and your own self. So that's why the goal of any relationship should not be a bandhan, but sambandha. That bondage which liberates you from this world and takes you to the realm of some spirit, the other world, where it is the full of life, full of eternity, full of happiness and full of knowledge. Moving on to the next one. Okay. Okay, this one is done. Okay. Now when we spoke about identity, so Sanatan Dharma has a concept called Swadharma. So the word dharma can be translated in many ways. Dharma means religion, dharma means duty as well. Swa means ourself, self. So Shastra clearly says that one is supposed to work according to his own nature. And he's supposed to put an endeavor to find out its own nature. Not just that you just go to school, you just did some engineering and you just go for a job. No, that's how you don't go for life like that. Like, you see many people who work in a corporate, at least I have seen in my experience, people work like 10 years, 15 years, and they just get fed up with their life. They're like, we don't want to do, they leave their job in total because there's so frustration, right? So that's why scriptures also say, I mean, it's not like you literally get a sin, but it is said that, it is also a sin not to work according to your own nature, because you are gifted with certain talent. You are supposed to use that talent by taking the resources from the nature, being grateful to the nature, then harness it and contribute back to the society. So basically, by not finding your swadharma, by not working according to your nature, you are like insulting the gift that you have received from the nature. Right. Again, it's not something like you'll be boiled in the hell for doing that, but it is something, it is like the way of saying it. So that's why scripture says that one must studiously avoid work which makes them dependent. Like a classic example, corporates. What many people do, it is, at least it is common, very much common in Hyderabad. So they work in certain companies, they draw a salary of like a lakh, 2 lakh, or something like that. Then they take the home loan and so many stuffs, and the car loan, this loan, education loan, that loan. Now they're so much overburdened by their loans that they become so much of dependent that their whole life is shabby, as in they can't leave the job, they don't want to stay in the job. Like, आ नहीं सकते, ना निकल सकते हैं, न जाने का मन है. That is like such a messed up life. That's why one should always ensure that he does any work that is make them less dependent, even including the loans. I mean, this topic is something that we're going to cover later on, but a simple example, one should always avoid as much as possible to take loans. Why? Because taking loans will leave you at the mercy of others. That is like an obligation. So the goal of a human life should not be to increase the obligation, increase the liabilities. Instead, we are supposed to increase the assets. What happens? The modern solution, if you see the simple example, nowadays when people are migrating from Delhi, say like from different parts of the country, they come to Hyderabad. They take a flat. Now they don't want to spend a lot of money on the furniture, which could be their asset, because because their corporate job also does not allow them to say settle at one place. Neither do they want to. So buying so many furniture is like a burden for them. So what they do, they go and rent from the places like Furlenco, Rentomojo, and all that thing. They take it on that monthly EMI. What are EMIs? EMIs are nothing but obligations. They are not your assets. Even if you pay that much, like, anyways, you have to give them back, because that is not something that you have purchased. Simple thing. That's what I said in the beginning. No, whatever you do in the basic life, that actually sets the psychology of your life. That's what the very beginning we started with the term psychology. How our day-to-day activities, like, the whole existence in your room is like Furlenco, Rento Mojo, bed rent pay, washing machine rent pay, fridge rent pay, sub rent pay. Basically, it's what? Everything is an obligation. Everything is making you dependent on your job. The moment your job goes, the whole furniture goes. You have nothing but an empty room to sit in. Right. So that's why Manu Samhita clearly says one must studiously avoid work which makes them dependent on others. Contrary to which, one must diligently pursue work which is entirely under their control. Right? You should always work. Okay, now when I say that don't depend on others, go everything on your control, it does not mean you leave your job right away and go everything. No, it doesn't work like that. Manu clearly says nothing goes abruptly. It has to always go step by step. So that's why they say work by doing which the inner man is satisfied. Do by all means avoid contrary. So always ensure slowly, gradually, step by step, move your profession, move your things, move your duties in a way that you are content in your own self. You're satisfied at the end of the day at what you're doing good. And that's what builds up your identity, and do not lose your identity. That's why I say one of the main reason why people die in Kali Yuga is over dependent on others. Over dependency, depend to a different, be it stress and so many other stuffs. We all know the different, the disadvantages of living a life of obligation. So that's why one must diligently pursue work which is entirely under the control. And that is nothing but finding your own swadharma, and you find your swadharma through endeavor, you know, through time, through a guru, uh, through a lot of study, the self vidya. And these are the things that you're supposed to dwell into, think about it over a period of time, understand your own nature, find out your swadharma. Now, when you find out your swadharma, now it's a time to contribute. See, this is the beauty of Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan Dharma not just it doesn't just say, okay, take, and just sit. Why? Because that's why it is clearly said, if you're a person who feels that I'm just a contributor, that's nothing but an arrogance. And if you feel that you're just on the receiving end, you're just keep on receiving from people and people, that is nothing but the biggest tragedy. You're living a tragic life, which is a very, very bad life. That's why a balance is that you receive from the nature, or you receive from the whole people and prakriti, you be grateful for it. And you harness your own swadharma, you harness your own identity, your whole existence, and you contribute to the world. Right? That's how our, you can make your whole life as a holistic or something. Moving on to the next one. Okay, these slides, they run so fast. Okay, now let's come to the relationship. So this is something nowadays it is very much a heated debate, like loyalty. So it is said that loyalty is a concept which discusses the consequences of stability. So it's like loyalty is a consequences, stability is a cause. Like for example, uh, I'll give you one example which happened in US, and it is happening in India as well. So a guy and a girl got married. Later on, that guy realized that he's a transgender and he wants to change his identity, as in he is associating very much with the other identity, and he wants to not change the identity of his. Basically he wants to turn from the male to the female. Now, if you actually see, there is no stability in life, right? Because a man needs a woman and a woman needs a man. I mean, that's how it makes a marriage, right? But if you see from this perspective, there is no stability in the relationship, right? And automatically, when there is no stability in relationship, you can gauge what the loyalty is going to be. It is by default. I mean, there are some exceptional cases, there in some part of the world where the wife has still remained with the husband because she is like, he's my soulmate, we are married to each other's souls but not to the bodies and everything. But by and large, if you see, that doesn't work like that. Stability is very, very important in one's life. Stability in terms of your finance, stability in terms of your relationship, stability in terms of your whole existence. Especially if you're raising your kids, it is very, very important to, first of all, to broaden their mind, to put that thought of stability in one's life. Why to take such grave examples. Let us take a simple example. If a person is not having a single penny to feed his family, do we really think that family or the wife the relationship is going to sustain? I mean, if it is happening by natural, some accident or something, that we can understand. But that the person is not stable, as in, not sure about foreign, but at least in India, no parent will ever give their daughter to a guy who is not at all stable financially, or enough, maybe they can surpass the things like family and all, because there are something which are beyond their control, but they would never want to give their daughters to a person who is not even financially stable. So loyalty is always a consequences of your stability. The more stable you are, the more firm your relationship is going to be. Nice. Moving on to the next one. Okay, space and relationship. At times, what happens? It happens knowingly and unknowingly both. It's not like it doesn't happen, and it's a one-way thing. But we really get to the other partners. That space is very much important, not just mentally, even physically. If you see, traditionally in India, the houses used to be very, very big, especially. Okay, this is something where I've seen many people talking that I have an ancestral place where they have a huge garden which is of no use, as in, there is no room. So what is modern people, they say, जितना जगह मिला building खड़ा करो, 2 BHK 3 BHK खत्म. They don't leave a space, they just want to make it da. So what happens when you're staying in a congested family, right? Having a space is very, very difficult. There are some times where, like, you would want to sit with a mug of coffee, probably, go in a balcony with a fresh air. You want to sit, you want to read a book. Like, if you're constantly someone or the other is nagging the small house, this child comes, that child comes, husband comes, wife comes, it's too much. Again, as I said in the beginning, the small day-to-day activity is what builds up your psychology, your thought process, and what comes as an outcome is in terms of your actions and the words. And if you see the example of Mahabharata, if you see like Krishna, he married 16,108 wives, and he ensured that every single wife gets her own palace, not a room or not a, like, house. He built 16,108 palace to each and every wife. Rukmini Satyabhama, they did not stay in one palace. They always stayed in the different palaces. So Krishna always ensured that every queen is getting her own place, like, not congested. That's why it is very much important to give that physical space, mental space as well. There is something that I've been seeing in web series. I don't know if it is happening in reality also, but this is something that happening. At least I have heard about it, that people want a little break from relationship, right? Why? Because they feel it is getting too much on the neck, like, to get into all these things. It is very much difficult. That's why space is very, very important in any marriage or relationship. The next comes compatibility. See, what happens many a times, people want to marry because they want to marry, or they want their kids to get married because that is their obligation to get them married. But Shastra clearly explains that compatibility is very, very important. Why astrology? Astrology is very, very important because astrology doesn't see one aspect of the life. Astrology see every aspect of your life, your finance, your age, your health, your relations, everything. It considers everything, and that's how astrology gives an indication saying that this person is 70% compatible to that person, or 60% to this compatible to this person. Again, how come, like, how much should we believe in astrology? That's a different subject matter, which we will cover in some other session. But but compatibility for any marriage is very, very important. That is more important than the marriage itself. That marriage obligation, that should be your most important consideration for any this thing. Then comes the most important topic, the hot debated topic, is your relationship. Every relationship is bound to certain shelf life. That, for example, that I gave in the beginning, that, a mother is supposed to retire the moment the son gets married. Like, let's say, for example, you have a son or your daughter. Your daughter gets married to some other place, she goes off. Your son gets married, being in the same house, he is also goes off. Like, it's not like you're cutting a relationship, but it is very, very important to give that space for you to retire, and you focus on the other aspect of life now. Like, at the young age, you focused on building up your own identity. In the middle age, you focused on your identity as well as taking up of your family. In the old age, like, you're supposed to focus more on trying to grow more and more inner thing, trying to learn the art of getting out of the stadium of this world. Like, once you're done with the match, you don't stay in stadium, you come out, right? That's how the life is supposed to be. Once you're done with all the duties, you have to come out of the stadium. But can we get a stadium just like that? No, we have to prepare ourselves. The classic example that we give is Mahabharata. So if you see, till the time Pandavas got married, you will see Pandavas with Kunti everywhere. After the Maharaj, Pandu Maharaj and the second wife of the step co-wife of Kunti, the Madri, they die or they leave their body. Kunti makes sure that she is a part of everything of her son's life, all the five sons. But the moment Draupadi gets married, it's not like she cuts off the relationship. It's just that she hands over her the responsibility. Therefore, if you see, in 12 years and 13 years of their exile, Kunti did not go because she knew that Draupadi is strong enough to handle all the five Pandavas. And it's not like Kunti stopped or there is some. That's why in Mahabharata you will never see any clash between Draupadi and Kunti, because Kunti understood, by now it's my time to retire. Now I need to focus on something more higher rather than going on all these things. So this is just an example. It can be your mother son, mother daughter. Like, one thing what happens, at least in my experience, I have seen that even after marrying their daughter, the mothers are so much into the daughter's life that they actually create a trouble for the daughter in her married life. This is something that we have been observed a lot, you know. And they always say, okay, Acha, too much of interference. Okay, how come your mother-in-law can tell like this? How come your husband tell like this? If there's something like this, you also tell these kind of answers. You also should not keep quiet. If you have something happens, I am there. You can come to my house. You can hear there and all. That sentimental words are good. I mean, that sentiment is good. That you still consider her your daughter and everything. But if you are overboarding that shelf life, right, you're creating your more and more trouble. When your daughter will actually learn to handle her own complication, you are there, but how long? Like by the time you get married, you will be like 50 for sure. By the time another 15, 20 years, you will die. After 20 years, what? How your daughter will be able to deal any relationship? That's why they say too much of comfort, too much of pampering is never a good thing for a child. That's why Manu Samhita clearly says conflict is very much important part of the life, because conflicts teaches us how to deal with the life, because life is never going to be like this plain. It is always going to be zigzag, zigzag. Like if you see the very nature, the nature is not same everywhere. If you go to south like Uti, Bangalore or North Himachal, it's all green. If you come to Hyderabad, Telangana, it's all Dakkan. It's you go to Rajasthan, it's all desert. It's if you go to all that East India, it's all beautiful nature. If you go towards more and more south and everything, that's ocean, right? The very ingredient of or the content of this whole nature is not similar, right? How do you expect that the whole life is going to be same, and how do you expect that you will be able to control or you will be able to have everything? I mean, you can't even have a control of your own life. I mean, we don't even know, like, will we ever survive, but we'll be able to survive to see the tomorrow morning also. I mean, I'm not trying to be pessimist, but there are things which are out of control. So always remember, there is always a shelf life. Relationships are like seasonal in terms of action. As in, you be a friend, for example, you are two female friends or two male friends. You have been sharing every damn thing of your life, you're like the chatti batti, like everything. But there comes a point where you both have to separate your ways in terms of your actions. You will never break your friendship, you all be remain the same, but at action level you are done. As in, after summer goes, the winter has to, the rainy season has to come. After the rainy, the winter has to come, right? The winter, then spring has to come. That's how it is. That's why one must understand the space and both the self life of relationship. Moving on to the next one, the cultural dependence versus irresponsible independence. So when someone is forced to depend on someone, it's like a slavery. Like as I said, you controlling, like, your son, your daughter to depend on yourself is nothing but creating a slaves. A teacher telling that, okay, fail the student just because I like him, that is again a slavery. You're making him a slave. But if you, when you choose to become dependent, there's a difference between the two: forced to dependent and choose to dependent. Forced to depend makes you slavery. Choose to become dependent, that becomes your inspiration, right? That's why they say modern independence creates arrogance and dependence creates slavery. Interdependence is the culture of Bharat, interdependence is the culture of Bhagavad Gita, interdependence is the culture of our Sanatan Dharma. That's why the very heading says cultural dependence versus irresponsible independence. We are not supposed to focus on the irresponsible independence. Like, okay, like, I'm going to do whatever I want to. I don't care. I don't this, that, like, that is nothing but just an arrogance. So what we aim for is, again, too much of dependency also, again, slavery. So our aim should always be to be a cultural independence on each other. Like, independence in a sambandha creates, independence in a bondage, as in interdependence culturally in a bondage, creates a sambandha, creates a way for your liberation. Moving on to the next one, last two slides we have. Okay, again, okay, this is something that is very, very important. It is like relevant to any age, break in a relationship. So what happens many a times, we don't try to understand, we don't put an investment to understand. See, if you have seen the caves of Hampi or anywhere, if you go to the caves are very different. It takes a time, it takes an energy to understand, entrance is from here, exit is from here. If you go to the same cave again, you will not come from the same exit. It is something like this, especially if places like Hampi, if you go there and see the caves. So relationships are like caves. Don't think it is like just straightforward. Okay, this person is like this, and khatam. That is nothing but conclusion. But a good relationships demands an investment to understand the person, to understand the good, bad, strength, weakness, and it also goes from the other party as well, right? So that's why if you really want to maintain a good relationship, if you really want to understand, if you really want to harness that relationship, investment is very, very, very required. So that's why, hence, yeah, just one second. I have some additional notes written down and all. Yeah, so so entering a relationship is like entering into a cave. So you can't conclude it from outside, saying that okay, this cave must be something like this, like this. If you're just concluding, you will never be in a relationship. You can never get into it. I know so many people who wouldn't want to talk to others, who don't want to initiate a conversation, who don't want to initiate like a relationship with someone just because they have their own judgment, saying that okay, this person is like this, like this. You can't say like if I take out my purse like here in the camera, you can't even say what is there in the purse without even looking into that purse. When you can't know the content of your of the such a small thing like a purse, how can we even expect to how much is it fair to judge a person based on that without even having an investment, without even having spent a time with them? So, so that's why they say like either we deny relationship or we dwell too much into that, matlab totally lost. But we always forget that we have to deal with the relationship. You know, you're neither in a denial mode you're supposed to go, neither you're supposed to dwell into relationship totally. You're supposed to deal with them. And hence the life teaches in the form of relationship that the more and more you explore, the greater confusion comes. That's why they say the moment you feel in a relationship that I've got everything and I understood the whole person, suddenly that very time you're wrong, and that means you have messed up your relationship. The moment at any point of time, whenever you say I got everything right in my relationship, that very moment it means you're messed up. So not just in terms of relationship, but more in terms of life, you're supposed to explore, because when you explore, you create more and more, like that leads to a lot of confusion. And when the confusion comes, you put an endeavor to clarify that confusion. And that's how the journey of life is supposed to be. You explore, you get confused. I mean, especially if you see the forts of Maharashtra, Raigad, and so many places, you try to explore the fort more and more. The moment you go here and there, you go somewhere else in some other route, right? Similar to what jungle. Now when you get confused, that says okay, no, I need to get back, I need to go to that peak, I need to come out of the forest. That gives an interviewer to clarify everything, right? And the more you clarify, the more you explore, the more you explore, the confusion, then clarity. That's how a life is supposed to be. Invest in life, invest in relationship. That is very much important. Being judgmental, being just concluding is not at all a great thing. You cannot judge a cave just by looking at outside. You have to get into it. Hence investment is very much required. So that's why the very first line says investment rather than conclusion. Moving on to the last part of the class. Okay, so this is something has been going in terms of more political. So the right-wing people, they always speak about the history and so many things. In the left wing, the liberals say, what is the use of talking about your history? You always boast about your history. How much is it relevant? Past is irrelevant as long as you're learning from the past. That's where the highest point says past matters as long as you learn from it, rather than just celebrating or just suffering. For example, if you see the third battle of Panipat, we had a movie as well. Like if you just constantly keep crying, okay, we lost, we lost, we lost, it doesn't happen like that. You have to learn from what all happened, what all led to the defeat of that great battle. Like if you see the next Peshwa, the Peshwa Madhav Rao, in the whole the Peshwa lineage, the Madhav Rao Peshwa is considered to be the greatest Peshwa. At the mere age of 16, he understood what is going on, because by the time he became Peshwa, the Maratha Empire, because they had a control over whole India, the system got so weakened that his own treasury did not had any control. People would take anything whenever they want to. When everything was brought into notice, one by one, he set everything into the place. And a 16-year-old boy, within 9 years, And less than 9 years, he made sure once again that the borders of Bharat is stretching till Afghanistan. The whole of the North India is everything was so unstable. Madhavrao Peshwa, such a young teenage boy, he learned from his past and he created a beautiful future. That's why they say learn from the past, act properly in the present, and you create a beautiful future. And the past matters as long as you learn from it rather than celebrating or suffering from it. And one of the things that Krishna is specific, very good about that, Krishna doesn't talk about anything as wrong. Okay, this is wrong, this is right. If you see throughout Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is not telling, okay, isko chodo, usko pakado, aisa karo, ye galat, wo sahi. Krishna is a very cool person. He says, if you do this, you will have this consequence. If you do this, you will have these consequences. Now you decide whether you want to do it, or if you want to do it, how you want to do it. That is the beauty of Krishna. And after giving so much of independence, so much of instruction, at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, again, still Krishna says to Arjuna, do as you feel good. I mean, what, do the needful. So this is where I end the session. So this is the first session of Art of Relationship. So I'll quickly go through. So in today's lesson, one of the first thing that we learned is how our day-to-day things makes our psychology, and how this psychology and what you are brought up in a home reflects outside as well. So what is a relationship, relationship between the relationships and the psychology, right? We understood from the very, very basic foundations as well, right from the very existence, our own name, family, kula, desh, country, how it helps us to build up that identity of our own self. Then we understood that, how a relationship is a connection to the base, and base principles and applications are always changeable based on time, place, and circumstances. Then we understood that we are talking, since the heading is relationship, to what exactly the relationship is. So we understood what exactly the relationship is, what is a bandhan, what is sambandha, what are the contents of a relationship, liberty or a dependence, happiness or a misery. Then we have gone through, then we understood that, how the identity is very much important in one's life. Then we went to the next topic of Swadharma and Loka Sangra. We understood how one must avoid the work which makes us dependent on others, and how to choose which entirely are control. And once you find out your Swadharma, how you are supposed to be gratitude for whatever you have received, and be contributor for contribute for the betterment of the world. Then we went on to understand the further aspects of relationship with the other person, loyalty and the stability. How stability is a cause which decides the consequences of loyalty. Then we move on to the another aspect of relationship, that is the space in relationship. How space, how compatibility is very much important. At the same time, how we should understand that time bound, because the world is not bound to one thing. It constantly moves. So we cannot, expect our whole this one thing to be in stagnant. We need to keep moving on. Then we understood about the cultural dependence and responsible independence. How too much of modern independence is like arrogance, too much of dependence is like a slavery. And what is our culture? Our culture is interdependence. Interdependency is a culture of Bharat, Bhagavad Gita, and Sanatana Dharma. Then we went on to the further intricacies of relationship, on how any relationship is like a battlefield, any relationship is like a cave. You cannot stand outside and understand. You have to invest yourself to understand it. And lastly, we went how we are supposed to look at the life, learn from the past, act properly, you create a future. That's why they say yesterday is a past, tomorrow is a future, but the present, whatever you have right now, today, yesterday is past, tomorrow is future. Today is a gift. That's why it is called present. So learn from the past, act properly in the present, so that you create a beautiful future in life. So here I conclude my words. So thank you all so much for joining me for today's session. We're going to have a second part of this lecture very soon, and we're going to go a little bit more and more. We're going to dive into details. So thank you so much. Have a great day.